The emergency sirens blared through the station, sending a wave of panic down the corridors. The airlocks sealed shut, containment protocols activated, and the automated voice of the onboard AI announced in a monotone, "Quarantine Protocol Alpha engaged, potential biohazard detected." Commander Jorvik of the Velnari delegation sprinted toward the medbay, his pale green skin flushed with stress. He had seen countless horrors across the galaxy, radiation plagues, nanite infestations, parasitic hive minds, but nothing had prepared him for this. The human was infected. Jorvik skidded to a halt outside the reinforced glass separating him from the chaos inside. Medical officers in full hazmat suits hovered around the prone figure of the human, their instruments scanning frantically. "Status report," Jorvik barked. Dr. Vree, an Uldar with 4 eyes that darted between screens, twitched in alarm. The human Cameron, I believe his name was found convulsing in the dining hall. Symptoms include violent retching, abdominal distress, fever, and, he hesitated, a disturbing resilience. Jorvik's mandibles clicked. Resilience? Yes, Commander. He appears to be in immense pain, yet he remains conscious. He even attempted to joke about it before collapsing. Jorvik pressed a hand to the glass, watching as Cameron groaned, gripping his stomach with a pained expression. "What do we know about the pathogen?" A medical officer adjusted his visor. "Unknown. It appears organic in nature, possibly bacterial or viral, but it hasn't spread beyond the human system. No other crew members show symptoms." Jorvik exhaled sharply. "Then how did it get here?" Dr. Vree hesitated before tapping his console. A holographic image of a meal tray appeared. "The human ingested this substance. Jorvik leaned in. The tray held remnants of something brownish-red, textured in an unsettling way. "What is that?" Dr. Vree's voice trembled. "It is called spaghetti with meat sauce." Jorvik recoiled. "He ate this willingly?" "Yes, Commander. Apparently it is considered a delicacy among humans, some kind of preserved ration. He retrieved it from his personal supply." Jorvik had seen humans survive vacuum exposure, rebuild broken machinery with nothing but wire and sheer audacity, and endure physical trauma that would reduce most species to whimpering wrecks. But this was madness. And this? Food. Poisoned him? Dr. Vree nodded gravely. "It appears so. He claims it tasted a little off, but he continued eating it regardless." Jorvik turned back to the medbay. Cameron, despite his obvious suffering, weakly raised a hand. His voice was hoarse but coherent. "You guys are making a big deal out of this." Jorvik nearly fell backward. "He's still talking?" Cameron gave a pained chuckle. "Yeah, food poisoning sucks, but I'll be fine." He grimaced, swallowing hard. "Just gotta ride it out." Jorvik stared, horrified. "You knowingly ingested something toxic and you believe you will recover?" Cameron groaned, shifting slightly. "Happened before. Bad seafood one time. Thought I was going to meet my ancestors, but I pulled through." Jorvik turned slowly to Dr. Vree. "Do humans frequently poison themselves?" Dr. Vree's mandibles twitched. "It would appear so." Jorvik took a step back, gripping his forehead. "This species is unhinged." Before anyone could respond, Cameron lurched forward, dry heaving. The medical officers scrambled to contain the situation, but he waved them off weakly. I got it. Okay, maybe I don't." Jorvik backed away from the glass as the medical team worked frantically. "How long until we know if this disease spreads?" Dr. Vree adjusted his readings. "If it were contagious, we would have seen symptoms in others by now. It seems isolated to the human." Jorvik exhaled, tension easing slightly. "So we will monitor him?" Dr. Vree nodded. "Yes, but based on his vital readings, he may recover within a few days." Jorvik stared at the doctor in disbelief. "Days? He was writhing in agony minutes ago." Dr. Vree hesitated. "Yes, but humans are built differently. Their biology is both fragile and absurdly durable. He may be severely weakened now, but within 72 to 96 hours, he could very well be back to full function. Jorvik turned back to the human, who was now mumbling something about regretting his life choices. This was the most terrifying thing he had ever witnessed. Jorvik watched in silent horror as Cameron, still visibly unwell, stubbornly tried to sit up. One of the medical officers, a cautious Torvani with elongated digits, pressed him back down with firm but careful pressure. The human groaned, but didn't resist. Dr. Vree adjusted the nutrient infusion line connected to Cameron's arm, his 4 eyes flicking over the medical monitors. The readings were erratic but stabilizing, though his body was still clearly under duress. His temperature remained alarmingly high by Velnari standards. His hydration levels fluctuated despite the IV fluids, and his digestive system was in full revolt. Jorvik turned to Vree, lowering his voice. "Are we certain we should not place him in stasis? His body is exhibiting severe distress." Vree hesitated, then shook his head. "Humans do not respond well to stasis under these conditions. Their metabolism requires active regulation, and their immune system functions in unpredictable ways. If we suspend him now, it may prolong his suffering rather than alleviate it." Jorvik could scarcely process that. "Then what do we do?" Vree's mandibles clicked in what could only be described as reluctant acceptance. "We wait." Cameron let out a weak chuckle. "Told you guys, just gotta ride it out." Jorvik turned, incredulous. "You are incapacitated. You are literally being sustained by medical intervention." Cameron exhaled slowly, as if collecting his strength. "Yeah, it's bad, but this is nothing. Worst case, a few more hours of misery. Maybe a couple of days of feeling like I got run over by a transport. But I'll get through it." Jorvik turned to Vree for confirmation. The doctor hesitated before nodding. "He is correct. The human immune system is aggressively adaptive. Given time, he will likely recover without permanent damage." Jorvik could hardly believe what he was hearing. This level of suffering is acceptable to humans? Cameron gave a weak shrug. "Not ideal, but we deal with it. Everyone's had bad food at least once." Jorvik's sense of reality wavered. "This is a known occurrence?" Vree answered before Cameron could. "Yes. My research indicates that foodborne illnesses are a common hazard among humans. Microbial contamination, improper storage, or even personal tolerance can result in symptoms such as his. And yet, instead of eliminating such risks entirely, they continue consuming potentially hazardous substances." Jorvik took a slow step back. "They know this happens, yet they continue to take the risk?" Cameron shifted slightly, adjusting the thin blanket draped over him. "Yeah. Look, we try to be careful, but sometimes things slip through. Expired food, undercooked meat, bad shellfish, you name it." Jorvik's posture stiffened. "You willingly ingest expired sustenance?" Cameron gave a tired laugh, though it quickly turned into a groan. "It's got dates on the packaging, but those are more like guidelines." Jorvik felt his stomach coil in something akin to dread. "Guidelines?" Vree's lower arms twitched slightly as he pulled up additional human dietary research. "Indeed, human food preservation is remarkably advanced, yet their instinct for consumption often overrides caution. They possess an unusual tolerance for bacterial exposure, frequently consuming fermented, aged, or even decayed matter under controlled conditions." Jorvik's expression darkened. "Decayed?" Cameron sighed. "That makes it sound worse than it is. Cheese, for example, aged meats, fermented vegetables. It's all about balance. You get the right bacteria, and it enhances the food instead of ruining it." Jorvik stared at him, his mind struggling to reconcile the words with any sense of logic. "You cultivate controlled spoilage?" Vree nodded. "It appears to be a widespread practice, yes." Jorvik took another step away from the medbay, as if simple proximity to Cameron might somehow infect him with this madness. "And this is considered normal?" Cameron exhaled, clearly exhausted but still determined to answer. "Yeah, more or less. Look, food is complicated. Sometimes you take a gamble, and sometimes the gamble really doesn't pay off." Jorvik's gaze flicked to the medical monitor still displaying Cameron's elevated heart rate, dehydration levels, and erratic temperature. This does not appear to be a minor consequence. Cameron chuckled weakly. It sucks, but I've had worse. Jorvik turned sharply to Vri. What could possibly be worse than this? Vri hesitated only a moment before pulling up a new display. There are documented cases of humans consuming improperly stored seafood, leading to paralysis. Others have suffered from a condition known as botulism, which shuts down their respiratory system entirely. Jorvik's breathing hitched. Yet they continue consuming these things. Cameron gave a weak thumbs up. Gotta eat something. Jorvik turned away, rubbing his temples. This was beyond recklessness. This was madness. Vri continued, his tone more clinical. While their food safety measures are extensive, human error, preference, or simple misfortune can still lead to incidents like this. However, their bodies are remarkably adept at handling such crises. Given time, Cameron's system will purge the contaminant. Jorvik turned back, glancing at the IV fluid still flowing into Cameron's veins. You call this handling it? Cameron smirked slightly, though the movement cost him. Hey, at least I didn't need surgery, just gotta let nature take its course. Jorvik's expression twisted. You are celebrating the fact that your body is engaged in open combat with a toxic substance? Cameron closed his eyes briefly. Not celebrating, just accepting it. This is how it goes. Jorvik exhaled sharply. I cannot comprehend how your species has survived. Cameron grinned despite himself, sheer stubbornness. Jorvik muttered something unintelligible and turned to Vri. How long until he is fully functional again? Vri considered the readings. Assuming no complications, he will likely be ambulatory within 48 hours. Full recovery within 72 to 96 hours. Jorvik's mandibles clicked in disbelief. This level of devastation and he will recover in mere days? Vri nodded. Jorvik studied Cameron for a long moment. The human, though clearly suffering, remained lucid, even joking. He had eaten something that had poisoned him, was undergoing what should have been a catastrophic biological crisis, and yet the medical staff was treating it as a temporary inconvenience. Jorvik turned and walked briskly away from the medbay, shaking his head. He had faced war, political intrigue, and cosmic anomalies, but nothing had disturbed him more than this. Humans were terrifying. Jorvik returned to the medbay 4 days later, fully expecting to find Cameron still bedridden, if not in critical condition. Instead, he was greeted by the sight of the human sitting upright, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. The IV line had been removed, and the monitors that once displayed alarming fluctuations now showed stable readings. Dr. Vri stood nearby, scanning a holopad as Cameron stretched stiff muscles. Jorvik slowed his approach, wary. You are functional? Cameron rolled his shoulders, wincing slightly. He still looked a bit pale, but his movements were steady. Yeah, more or less. Still feel like I got hit by a cargo freighter, but I'll live. Jorvik turned to Vri, seeking confirmation. The doctor gave a measured nod. His biomarkers indicate full systemic recovery. Dehydration has been corrected, fever has resolved, and gastrointestinal distress has ceased. He is medically cleared for duty. Jorvik glanced between them. You were incapacitated, your body engaged in violent rejection of ingested toxins, and now you are simply fine? Cameron exhaled. Pretty much. Took a few days, but that's food poisoning for you. Jorvik's mandibles tensed. This is not how biological crises resolve. Vri adjusted his holopad. For most species, no. For humans, it appears to be routine. Jorvik's eyes narrowed. This is routine? Cameron gave a dry chuckle. Yeah, it happens. Not often, but it's part of the risk. You eat something bad, your body deals with it. Jorvik's mind reeled. Your body deals with it by violently incapacitating you for days. Cameron shrugged. Yeah, but then it's over. Jorvik turned to Vri. No lingering effects? Vri shook his head. None. His vitals are stable, digestion normalizing. As long as he maintains hydration and nutrition, there will be no long-term consequences. Jorvik watched in muted horror as Cameron stood, stretching again as if shaking off mere fatigue. "This does not make sense." Cameron sighed. "Look, it's not ideal. No one wants this to happen, but the body knows how to get rid of what shouldn't be there. It's a miserable process, but once it's done, it's done." Jorvik gestured sharply. "You were on the verge of systemic collapse." Cameron tilted his head. "Yeah, but I wasn't dying." Jorvik inhaled deeply, struggling for composure. "You ingested something hazardous, suffered near total physiological distress, and now you are simply walking out?" Cameron gave a tired grin. "Yeah, that's kind of how it works." Jorvik turned to Vree, who simply nodded again in silent confirmation. Jorvik stared at Cameron for a long moment. "Your species is incomprehensible." Cameron laughed. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Jorvik ran a hand over his face. "Whew. I need to sit down." Cameron clapped him on the shoulder as he walked past. "You should eat something, just, not from my stash." Jorvik groaned. Jorvik followed Cameron out of the medbay, still grappling with everything he had witnessed. The human walked unsteadily but with growing confidence, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the last remnants of his ordeal. Jorvik kept a close watch, half expecting the human to collapse again, but Cameron simply adjusted his uniform and moved forward as if the last 4 days had been an inconvenient delay rather than a biological catastrophe. They reached the main hall, where several crew members subtly edged away from Cameron, their expressions a mixture of awe and unease. Word had spread quickly the human had succumbed to a violent, unknown affliction, endured unimaginable suffering, and now he was walking around as if nothing had happened. Jorvik slowed his pace, turning slightly toward Cameron. "You are certain you are not still compromised?" Cameron exhaled through his nose, adjusting his stance. "Yeah, still a little weak, but that's normal. My body's done fighting." Jorvik scrutinized him, searching for any sign of deception. Humans were unpredictable, but this bordered on absurd. "You expect me to believe that after your system was in full revolt, you are now simply recovered?" Cameron gave a small, tired laugh. "Not 100%, but yeah, pretty much. Once the worst is over, the rest is just getting hydration back, eating something mild, and waiting for energy levels to return." Jorvik's mandibles twitched. "You speak as though this is routine maintenance." Cameron glanced at him, amused. "In a way, it is. I mean, it's not fun, but it's not exactly rare either. Everyone gets food poisoning at some point." Jorvik stopped in his tracks. Several passing crew members flinched as his posture stiffened. "Everyone?" Cameron turned, looking mildly confused at the reaction. "I mean, yeah, if you eat long enough, odds are you'll run into something that doesn't sit right. Could be bacteria, could be a bad reaction to something you didn't realize you were sensitive to. It happens." Jorvik pressed a hand to his forehead, struggling to comprehend. "And yet your species continues to take these risks?" Cameron shrugged. "We don't do it on purpose. Sometimes food is contaminated even when it looks fine. Sometimes you misjudge whether something's still good. Sometimes it's just bad luck." Jorvik inhaled sharply. "And despite this, you do not alter your methods?" Cameron scratched the back of his neck. "Well, we've improved food safety a lot. Refrigeration, preservatives, better handling practices, but nothing's perfect. Even the best procedures can't prevent everything." Jorvik stared at him. "This is not an acceptable answer." Cameron exhaled and shook his head. "Look, I get that this sounds insane to you, but humans are built for this kind of thing. Our immune systems are aggressive. We take a hit, we bounce back." Jorvik's expression darkened. "I witnessed you incapacitated for days." Cameron nodded. "Yeah, and now I'm not." Jorvik clenched his jaw, trying to find some logical flaw in the human's reasoning. "You do not consider altering your diet entirely to remove risk?" Cameron tilted his head. "We try, but food is complicated. If we avoided everything that could ever make someone sick, we'd be down to a handful of options. And even then, something would still find a way to cause problems." Jorvik's hands tensed. "You accept this as a fact of existence?" Cameron nodded. Yeah. And honestly, this wasn't even the worst case. There are way nastier foodborne illnesses out there. Jorvik's breathing hitched. Worse? Cameron nodded. Oh yeah. There's stuff that can knock you out for weeks, stuff that can cause nerve damage, even some bacteria that can be fatal if not caught early. Jorvik stepped back. Yet you continue eating as if this is not a daily threat? Cameron gave him a knowing look. Because it's not. Most of the time, food is safe. We've got regulations, inspections, safety measures, but sometimes things slip through, and when they do, our bodies handle it. Jorvik's mandibles flexed. This is not handling it. This is barely surviving it. Cameron chuckled. You say that, but here I am, walking around again. Jorvik exhaled, shaking his head. I will never understand your species. Cameron grinned. That's fair. Jorvik studied him for a long moment. The human had endured what should have been a catastrophic event, yet here he was, already moving forward as if it were just another inconvenience. Jorvik turned away, muttering under his breath. Humans were impossible. Jorvik followed Cameron down the corridor, still grappling with the sheer absurdity of the situation. The human moved with a relaxed gait, his recovery nothing short of unsettling. No lingering frailty, no hesitation, just a casual return to routine as if nothing had happened. Crew members kept their distance, their expressions betraying a mixture of wariness and curiosity. Whispers followed in their wake, but Cameron seemed entirely unbothered. Jorvik quickened his pace, stepping into stride beside him. You are aware that the crew now views you as a biological anomaly. Cameron laughed. Yeah, I figured. They were looking at me like I was about to keel over again. Jorvik's mandibles flexed. Because, by all logic, you should be. Cameron glanced at him, amused. I told you this is normal for us. It sucked, but I bounced back. Jorvik exhaled sharply. You were incapacitated by your own actions, and your response is to continue as though nothing occurred? Cameron shrugged. What else am I supposed to do? Hide in my quarters? Life goes on. Jorvik's posture stiffened. There was genuine concern that your condition would escalate into something catastrophic. Yet you appear unaffected, as though your suffering was inconsequential. Cameron gave a thoughtful nod. It wasn't fun, but it's over. No point dwelling on it. Besides, I've got stuff to do. Jorvik stared at him. Do you not require additional recovery time? Cameron shook his head. Nah, I've rested enough. Just need some real food and I'll be good. Jorvik halted mid-stride. You intend to eat again? Cameron turned, confused. Of course, can't go forever without food. Jorvik's mandibles clicked. You were poisoned by your own sustenance, and your immediate solution is to ingest more? Cameron crossed his arms. Yeah. Not the same thing, obviously. Gonna stick to something light. Maybe some broth? Jorvik's expression darkened. You possess no innate caution? Cameron sighed. I'm not gonna make the same mistake twice, but I can't just stop eating because I got sick once. Jorvik inhaled deeply, composing himself. Your species is reckless. Cameron grinned. We call it resilience. Jorvik muttered something under his breath, shaking his head. There was no reasoning with humans.